You know that feeling when you walk into a room expecting a standing ovation, but nobody even looks up. That is exactly the nightmare Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are living through right now. For years, they screamed for privacy while turning their entire existence into a reality show. They preached about authenticity while dodging the simplest questions. But lately, the energy has shifted. It's not just that people are angry anymore. It's something much worse for a brand built on attention. People are bored. But here is the wildest part, and the one thing that keeps the royal insiders up at night. While the world is watching their business deals crumble, there is a much darker, more specific secret brewing in the background. It's the one topic they absolutely refuse to discuss. It's the one area where their transparency turns into a brick wall. We need to talk about the children. Because once you start pulling at the loose threads regarding Archie and Lilibet, the whole glossy tapestry of their life starts to unravel. And what is underneath might be the biggest royal deception we have seen in decades. Let's set the scene regarding where they actually stand today. Their wedding anniversary recently rolled around. In the past, this would have been a global event. You know the drill, the glossy black and white Instagram photos released to the press, the coordinated leaks to People magazine about how in love they are, and the outpouring of congratulations from their A-list friends. They have made a whole career out of curating these perfect cinematic milestones. But this time, crickets. Absolute radio silence. It wasn't just that the royal family didn't post, we expected that. The stinging part was that their Hollywood circle didn't bother to show up either. No gushing posts from Tyler Perry, no supportive stories from the Clooneys. It was as if the world collectively decided to swipe left. For a couple that curates their visibility like an influencer managing content assets, this wasn't an oversight. This was a message. Think about the psychology of that. These are two people who left the monarchy specifically to control their own narrative and build a billion-dollar brand. They had Netflix throwing money at them. They had Spotify thinking they were the next big thing. Fast forward to now, and they are being labeled grifters by executives and ignored by the very elite they tried to impress. When you strip away the PR machine and the strategic partnerships, what is left? Apparently not much. But here is the kicker. This silence on their anniversary was just the appetizer. It was a preview of what happens when the public stops buying what you are selling. But while their popularity is tanking, the real story, the one that could legally impact the monarchy itself, is happening behind closed doors. And it involves a timeline that just doesn't add up. Let's get into the uncomfortable stuff. The stuff that mainstream media is terrified to touch because it sounds crazy until you actually look at the evidence. We need to talk about the births. If you have followed the royal family for any amount of time, you know there is a formula. It's not just tradition. It's a protocol designed for verification. The mother goes to the hospital, the medical team is documented, the birth happens, and then boom, the parents step outside. They stand on the steps, they wave, and they show the new heir to the world. Kate Middleton did this 3 times. Was it fun for her? Probably not. She stood there in heels, hours after giving birth, hair blown out, smiling for the cameras. Why? Because that is the deal. It's transparency. It's showing the taxpayers and the world that the line of succession is secure and legitimate. It's visual proof of life and lineage. Meghan Markle threw that entire playbook into the incinerator. With Archie, and especially with Lilibet, we got nothing. No hospital steps, no witnessed entrance or exit, just weird grainy photos released days or weeks later, often with bizarre angles or filters. We got a statement that the Duchess went into labor after she had already allegedly given birth. The timeline was a mess. Royal watchers didn't just find this rude, they found it suspicious. When you are bringing a child into the line of succession, a child who could technically inherit the throne, transparency isn't a nice to have. It is a requirement. By hiding the process, they didn't protect their privacy. They sparked a wildfire of conspiracy theories. And the more they hid, the louder the whispers became. What exactly was happening in those delivery rooms? Or as some darker corners of the internet suggest, were they even in the delivery room at all? Now I know what you're thinking. Come on, questioning a pregnancy is low. And usually I would agree. But we aren't talking about a random celebrity here. We are talking about a constitutional institution. And the visual evidence that has surfaced over the years is unsettling. People started noticing things. During the pregnancies, there were days where the bump seemed to shift. There are photos from the morning where she looks 6 months along and photos from the afternoon where she looks barely 3. There are videos of her squatting down in 6-inch heels with her knees together, a physical feat that any woman who has actually carried a near-term baby will tell you is physically impossible due to the center of gravity and the baby's head engagement. I'm not making this up. Go look at the archives. The internet is forever. You have the famous popping sound video that went viral where she stood up and something seemed to click. You have the coat-flicking gestures constantly drawing attention to the midsection, almost like a stage actor making sure you see the prop. When Kate was pregnant, she looked tired. Her face puffed up. She carried the weight in her legs and ankles. It was visceral and real. With Meghan aside from the stomach, nothing changed. No swollen ankles, no puffiness in the face until strangely after the alleged birth. It made people feel gaslit. We were being told to believe something that our eyes were struggling to process. And whenever anyone pointed this out, not in a hateful way, but in a, hey, that's anatomically weird way, they were attacked. They were called racists, haters trolls. But since when is asking for basic consistency a hate crime? The aggression used to shut down these questions makes you wonder, why are they fighting so hard to stop people from looking closely? But let's move away from the photos and look at the paperwork. Because in the royal family, the paperwork is everything. For generations, royal births are verified by the royal doctors. These are specific medical professionals whose job is to sign off on the delivery to ensure the bloodline is verified. It sounds medieval, but that is how the monarchy works. It is a business of blood. With Archie and Lilibet, the signature situation is murky at best. The traditional announcement on the easel at Buckingham Palace. It didn't happen the same way. The signatures of the royal physicians missing or shrouded in secrecy. There were reports that the doctors who allegedly delivered the children remained unnamed for privacy reasons. Since when do doctors need privacy from signing a birth certificate? Here is why this matters. If a child is born via surrogate, in the eyes of British royal law, they are not currently eligible for the line of succession. They can be loved, they can be family, but they cannot be prince or princess, and they cannot be in line for the throne. If, and I stress if, they used a surrogate and covered it up to keep the titles, that is not just a little lie. That is fraud. That is a massive deception against the British public and the crown. It would explain the secrecy. It would explain the refusal to use royal doctors. It would explain why they hide the kids from the public eye. If the kids are seen too much, or if the medical records are ever unsealed, the entire house of cards comes crashing down. And then, just to make things more complicated, they decided to play the ultimate emotional card, the name. Naming their daughter Lilibet wasn't just a sweet nod to the Queen. Lilibet was the Queen's private childhood nickname. It was the name her father used. It was the name her late husband, Prince Philip, used. It was sacred to her. It belonged to a very small, intimate circle of people she loved. When Harry and Meghan announced they had taken the name, they claimed they asked for permission. But reports from inside the palace paint a very different, much uglier picture. Insiders suggested the Queen was furious. She wasn't asked, she was informed. And by the time they told her, they had likely already registered the website domains. Think about the arrogance of that. You leave the family, you trash the institution, you accuse them of racism and cruelty on Oprah, and then you steal the matriarch's most private nickname to brand your daughter. It felt like a power move. It felt like they were trying to attach their brand to the Queen's legacy because their own brand wasn't strong enough to stand alone. And the worst part, it put a child in the middle of a global conflict. That little girl now carries a name that is synonymous with controversy, not tribute. It was a marketing decision, plain and simple. And it backfired because it showed the world that there is nothing they won't commercialize, even their grandmother's most private memories. You can tell a lot about a person by how they react to pressure. And Harry, he is cracking. Watch his face in interviews when the topic of his family or the kids comes up. It's not the calm demeanor of a protective father. A protective dad says, "We just want them to have a normal life." Anne smiles. Harry goes into full-blown panic mode. His eyes dart around, he gets aggressive. He stammers. This is the behavior of a man who is terrified of slipping up. He knows that one wrong word, one contradictory detail, and the internet sleuths will tear the story apart. Remember, this is the guy who wrote a memoir sharing the most intimate, embarrassing details about his frozen Todger and his brother's private life. He has no problem violating privacy when it sells books. So why the aggressive fortress around the basic facts of his children's birth? It's the contradiction that kills his credibility. You can't demand total privacy for your own secrets while selling out everyone else's. That hypocrisy suggests fear. He acts like someone who is guarding a lie, not a life. And Meghan, she is often nowhere to be found when these hard questions are asked. She lets Harry go out on the front lines looking unhinged and paranoid while she stays back curating the image. She is watching the clouds, testing the wind, making sure she isn't standing next to him when the lightning strikes. All of this, the weird births, the secrecy, the name games, it all feeds into the bigger picture of their collapse. They thought they could leave the royal family, keep the titles, hide the kids, and still be treated like global royalty. They thought they could operate in the gray area forever. But the world is black and white. You are either in or you are out. You are either transparent or you are hiding something. The media deals falling apart are just the symptom. The disease is the lack of trust. Netflix sees it. Spotify saw it. The Hollywood A-listers see it. Nobody wants to be in business with people who are legally and ethically a liability. If the story about the children ever comes out, if it turns out they did lie about the births or the surrogacy to keep the titles, the backlash won't just be bad. It will be career-ending. It will be the end of them as public figures. And maybe deep down they know that. Maybe that's why the silence on their anniversary was so loud. Maybe that's why they look so desperate in their rare public appearances. They are holding onto a door that is being blown open by the wind, and they are running out of strength to keep it shut. If you thought the birth announcements were shady, the christening of Lilibet was where the cracks in the story turned into gaping holes. In the British royal family, a christening isn't just a religious ceremony. It's a matter of public record. It is a historical event. The baby wears the Honiton lace gown, a replica of the one used since Queen Victoria's era. The Archbishop of Canterbury performs the rite. Holy water is flown in from the River Jordan. It is steeped in centuries of tradition because the monarch is the head of the Church of England. So what did Harry and Meghan do? They held a secret backyard ceremony in California with a gospel choir and Tyler Perry. Now there is nothing wrong with a private ceremony, but when you are demanding that your children be titled prince and princess titles that are inextricably linked to the church and the monarchy, you cannot just bypass the entire religious protocol that grants those titles their weight. Reports surfaced that the royals weren't even invited, or if they were, it was such last-minute notice that they knew no one could attend. Think about the optics of that. They used the titles for the website and the branding, but they rejected the traditions that give those titles meaning. It felt less like a holy sacrament and more like a networking event for their Hollywood contacts. And speaking of contacts, let's talk about the godparents. Usually, godparents are chosen to spiritually guide the child within the framework of their royal destiny. Harry and Meghan chose Tyler Perry, a man who had barely met them before letting them crash at his house. It screams of transaction, not tradition. It suggests that their inner circle had shrunk so drastically that they had to rely on a benefactor rather than lifelong friends or family. But here is where the story shifts from gossip to a potential constitutional crisis. This is the part the palace lawyers are sweating over. There is a very specific, very old law in Britain regarding succession. It's called the born of the body rule. To be in line for the throne, a child must be born of the body of the wife of the potential heir. This law was written before IVF and surrogacy existed, but it still stands. If, and this is the billion-dollar question, if Meghan used a surrogate, even if the biological material is 100% theirs, the children are legally disqualified from the line of succession. They would be loved family members, sure, but they would not be Prince Archie or Princess Lilibet. This is why the lack of doctors' signatures on the birth announcements is such a massive red flag. If a surrogate delivered the baby, the royal physicians could not sign off on witnessing Meghan give birth. They would be committing fraud. So instead of signing a lie, they simply didn't sign at all. This explains the obsessive secrecy. It explains the hostility. If the public found out that they knowingly bypassed royal law to secure titles for children who weren't eligible for them, the backlash would be catastrophic. It wouldn't just be a scandal. It would be grounds for removing their titles entirely. It would look like they tricked the queen, tricked the king, and tricked the public. And in the court of public opinion, that kind of deception is unforgivable. Finally, we have to look at the human cost of this isolation. Harry talks constantly about breaking the cycle of genetic pain. He wrote a whole book about how traumatic his childhood was. Yet look at what he is doing to his own kids. Archie and Lilibet are growing up in a vacuum. They are the ghost children of Montecito. They have no relationship with their grandfather, the king. They have never played with their cousins George, Charlotte, and Louis. They are completely cut off from the history and the family that is their birthright. While the Wales children are seen at Trooping the Color, waving to crowds learning the ropes of duty and service, the Sussex children are hidden behind high walls and NDAs. What happens in 10 years when Archie Googles his name? What happens when he sees the photos of the family he was never allowed to meet? What happens when he realizes his parents traded his heritage for a failed podcast deal and a jar of jam? Harry has isolated them so thoroughly that their only reality is the one he and Meghan construct. That isn't protection, that is control. And as we know, control always eventually slips. The irony is tragic. Harry left the UK to save his kids from the zoo, but he has locked them in a cage of his own making. A gilded cage, sure, but a cage nonetheless. And the sad truth is, the longer they stay hidden, the less the public cares. We aren't asking, how are the kids, anymore. We are starting to ask, do these kids even know who they are? So where does this leave us? We are watching a slow-motion car crash of a brand that was once valued at billions. But beyond the money and the fame, there is a human tragedy here. There are two children, Archie and Lilibet, who are growing up in a fortress of secrets used as pawns in a high-stakes PR game. The public isn't asking for access to their private moments. We don't need to see them in the bath or eating breakfast. But when you claim a birthright, when you claim a title that belongs to history, you owe history the truth. You owe the people the truth. Harry and Meghan tried to rewrite the rules of a 1,000-year-old institution. They thought they were smarter than the system. But as the silence from Hollywood grows louder and the questions about the kids get sharper, they are learning a hard lesson. You can only hide the truth for so long. Eventually, the fog lifts. And when it does, you better hope you are standing on solid ground, because right now it looks like they are standing on a trapdoor. And frankly, the lever is about to be pulled. Make sure you're subscribed, because when this story finally breaks, and it will, you are going to want to be here for the fallout. It's going to be historic.